Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about compression. Compression is a term in audio that we use when referring to dynamics, when we refer to certain tonal things that are happening to certain instruments, and it's a great mixing tool. It's a great thing to know how to do. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. But before we dive super far into compression, let's talk about dynamics. Now, just for ease of use, I Googled the definition of dynamics in a musical context, and I'll just read that aloud. In music, the dynamics of a piece are the variation in loudness between notes or phrases. Dynamics are indicated by specific musical notation, often in some detail. So dynamics are, in essence, the difference in the loud parts of the song and the soft parts of the song. So let's say you're playing and you're a little too loud, and then later in the song you feel like you're too quiet. That's a pretty normal thing. Playing bass, especially plugging straight into an amp or straight into a PA, you might notice there's a whole lot of peaks and valleys in your signal. These really loud pops and these really soft, quiet notes that might sound cool on an individual level, but alongside a drummer and guitar players and singers and backing tracks, it might get a little lost. So what do we do with compression? Compression is a way that allows us to kind of even out those dynamics in our sound. Now, you don't want to completely squash away any ounce of articulation. That is definitely one thing we'll talk about. But compression is a really helpful tool in bringing up the quiet parts of your sound and kind of restricting or bringing down the really loud parts of your sound. So how to use compression? There's a number of ways you can go about it. There are compressor pedals that you can use. There are hardware rack-mounted compressors. There are compressor plugins. There are compressor little boxes I've seen of units that kind of sit off to the side. And they're all kind of, in essence, doing a very similar thing. Now, they might be doing it at different scales with different tonal variations. But for the most part, they're going to be operating with the same basic vocabulary. And so we'll walk through a couple key terms into understanding compression that will really help. So the first one that you're going to come across is probably a word like threshold, input, some kind of knob or button that allows you to control how much the compression is affecting your signal. So on this compressor, this is the Cali 76 Compact Bass by Origin Effects, has an input knob because this is what's called a fixed threshold compressor. We'll talk about what that means. So within every compression device, there's a threshold that is determined. And what happens is, as you push your instrument level past that threshold, it will be compressed down, meaning made quieter, in accordance with the compressor ratio. And the compressor ratio sets the amount of applied compression. The numbers indicate the ratio of input to output. So the higher the ratio, the more extreme the compression. This took a long time for me to understand because the math behind it is a little weird. For example, with a compression ratio of 2:1, an input signal must cross the threshold by 2 decibels for the output level to increase by 1. So a 2:1 ratio would be really light compression. That would be natural feeling, but you might notice a little more tightness. While a ratio like 10:1 is going to be a really heavy amount of compression. It's going to kind of squash stuff down to be a little bit of a brick, and you might want that. So going back to these pedal compressors, we have with the Cali 76 an example of a fixed threshold compressor where the threshold is set inside of the device. And you determine how hard you're compressing your signal by how much input level that you're giving into the unit. If you turn the in knob all the way down, you're not going to get any audio in or out of your device unless you use the clean blend. With the input cranked, you're going to get a whole lot of compression. One interesting thing about this pedal and a couple others is you can do what's called parallel compression, which is where you mix in a completely clean, uncompressed, for the most part unprocessed unless you're running alongside other effects, signal in addition to your compressed sound. That allows you to get the consistency and vibe that comes with compression without necessarily losing all of your playing dynamics. So on this compressor, this is the Walrus Audio Mira, this is a variable threshold compressor. So you'll see the knob there, it says threshold. You're actually moving around where the compressor is going to be targeting in your sound. Instead of having it set to where the input is driving the compression, you're instead going to be moving around the threshold and bringing up the level with makeup gain. So another thing with compression, you'll see attack and release times. So on this pedal, you've got attack and release marked there. And this is where stuff can get a little bit weird and complex. Depending on the kind of compressor you're using, it might be different. You might, on certain styles of compressors, fully clockwise is going to be the slowest attack. On some compressors, fully counterclockwise is going to be the slowest attack. So instead of talking about knob positions, we're just going to talk about the terms. So with attack and release, it is essentially the amount of time that the compressor takes to kick in and let go of your signal. Oh, Editor Jonah here. I do know that there will be someone out there who probably comments saying, Jonah, it's not actually how long it takes for the compressor to kick in. I don't care. This is a good enough analogy. It works. I love you very much. Thank you for watching. Let's continue. The way that I heard attack time taught to me was the attack of a compressor is the amount of time it takes between making a super loud noise and your mom yelling from across the house, "What was that thing?" So for example, if I've got a really fast attack time on my compressor, there's going to be basically no time at all between me playing my note and the compressor clamping down on it. That creates a really smooth, big, fat, articulate kind of sound. While if I keep the attack time really slow, it'll let the initial front end percussive element of my note come through a little more than otherwise. And depending on the kind of compressor you're using, you might be able to let a lot of that front end attack through, or you might be squashing your sound pretty quickly no matter what. The release time is kind of the same thing, but at the end of the note. A very quick release is going to, as soon as the note lets up, the compressor lets up, and that'll feel pretty natural. If you have a longer release time, the compressor is actually going to take a longer amount of time to release. So if you're playing really quick, fast notes, the compressor might not have enough time to catch up with the front end of your note, and this can smooth things out really nicely, but you can also lose a bit of articulation. So I picked up my bass, and we're going to talk and hear what compression sounds like in real time. So starting off, I'm actually going to start off with kind of how I use compression. I like to smack things pretty hard. So I'm running into a Empirical Labs Distressor, which is a super cool hardware compressor. And you will see probably down here these settings that I'm using. Right now I'm set on a 10-to-1 ratio, which is pretty aggressive, with the slowest attack time and the fastest release time. On the Distressor, this is mimicking an opto-style compressor, which to me, it kind of sounds like an LA2A, just with a little less fatness. So this is what it sounds like. I'll do fingers first and then pick without compression and then with compression. So here's just bass into the preamp. Cool. And here's with compression. So to me, pretty much immediately, I just hear a little bit more of the bass. I hear a little more of the low end. I feel like the whole thing is a little bit more upfront and in your face. So that's with a pretty slow attack time and a pretty fast release time. And on the gain reduction meter, I'm hitting about minus 12, minus 14, which is smacking it. This is a lot of compression. So let's go through some more subtle settings and see what that sounds like. Same settings at a 2-to-1 ratio. Pretty much immediately, you'll notice that it's louder. That's because with this kind of compressor, which is a fixed threshold compressor, since I've now adjusted the ratio to be lighter, now to a 2-to-1, it's going to be louder. It's compressing it less. Let's move over to 4-to-1. So here's 4-1. Kind of fun. Let's keep going. So here's a 20-1 compression ratio. And to me, the cool thing about having a slow attack and a fast release is you can actually compress the sound quite a bit and still retain a somewhat natural feel. I'm compressing it 20-1 right now, just with a whole lot of stuff going on. And it still feels pretty good. This is not, to me, overly aggressive compression. So let's go back to 10-1. And let's explore some attack and release time stuff. So this is with the attack time at the absolute slowest. So you'll hear a lot of the front end. And I'm going to play this with a pick so you can hear it with a little more articulation. All right, so now let's take the attack time to the absolute fastest it'll go. You can hear the compressor kind of begging for help a little bit. Looking at the meter, it's all the way red. It is all the way clocked in. And that's because the compressor is immediately hitting every single thing that's going on and then releasing it as fast as possible. And that creates sometimes some distortion, some kind of full over sounds, which can be interesting. I don't necessarily find it super usable. So let's put somewhere in the middle. Here's at a 6. So you can still hear pretty quickly how it's compressing the signal very quickly. I like to leave things a little more open if I'm using compression like that. So now let's move on to release time. So we're back to 10-1 ratio opto mode here on the distressor. And let's take the release to its absolute slowest. So right now we're on that really fast release, and we'll back it up. Do you hear how the note itself is kind of being squashed off at the end? It is still compressed. Watching the gain reduction meter, it is still going down. And so watch what happens when I hit a note for the first time. Hear that big kind of spike? That's what happens with a super slow release time. Is you'll get a big spike at the front of your note and then a whole lot of quiet, smooth feel. So this is one style of compression. Let's dial in another sound that might be a little bit more compressed and a little more fat. So I backed up the input from 6 to 5, put the attack at 6, the release at 2, and the output is 7, all on the distressor. And this might be a little bit more of a kind of sausage style compression that you would look for. I'm going to play with my fingers. You'll hear how it's really nice and smooth and tight. Another thing that compression does is it adds a lot of sustain to your instrument. I can play this note, And with compression, it's going to ring out for a whole long amount of time. Anyway, that was part 1 of our compression videos. I'll probably do another one here at some point in time. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel. Feel free to find me on social media. Give me a follow, shoot me a message. Let's hang out and talk. Until next time, I'll catch you later.